I felt her eyes on me all night, lingering longer than they should have. Vanessa moved through Rick's house party with practiced grace, playing the perfect hostess, but every time she passed me, her fingers would brush my arm, her breath would warm my neck as she leaned in to whisper something casual. The wine made everything feel softer, more dangerous. When she finally cornered me in the upstairs hallway, her hand pressed against the wall beside my head, I knew exactly what was happening. "You've been watching me too," she murmured, her voice low and certain. I should have stepped away. I should have gone downstairs where Rick was laughing with his friends. Instead, I let her guide me into their bedroom, my pulse racing as she closed the door behind us. Enjoyed the start? Hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what caught your attention. Her lips found mine before I could think. Soft, but insistent, tasting like the expensive wine she'd been sipping all evening. My hands found her waist instinctively, pulling her closer as she pressed me back against the door. The party continued downstairs. Laughter, music, the clink of glasses. But up here, the world had narrowed to just us. Her fingers traced along my collarbone, slipping beneath the thin straps of my dress with deliberate slowness. "Rick's busy downstairs," she whispered against my lips, her breath warm and intoxicating. "He won't miss us for a while." The danger of it sent electricity through my veins. This was Rick's wife, my friend's partner, but the way she touched me made every rational thought dissolve. Her hands were confident, experienced, knowing exactly how to make my breath catch. She guided me toward the bed, her movements fluid and purposeful. "I've wanted this since the moment you walked in tonight," she confessed, her fingers working the zipper of my dress with practiced ease. The fabric pooled at my feet, and I felt exposed, vulnerable, but also alive in a way I hadn't experienced in months. Vanessa stepped back, her gaze trailing over me with obvious appreciation. She was still fully dressed, maintaining that sense of control that made my knees weak. "You're even more beautiful than I imagined," she said, her voice thick with desire. She moved closer again, her hands skimming over my skin with feather-light touches that left me shivering. When her lips found my neck, I couldn't suppress the soft sound that escaped me. Her mouth was warm, her tongue tracing patterns that made my head fall back against the wall. "Shh," she whispered, though her tone was amused rather than concerned. "We have to be quiet." The reminder of where we were, what we were risking, only intensified the moment. Her hands cupped my face, tilting it so she could look directly into my eyes. There was something predatory in her gaze, but also tender, as if she understood the magnitude of what we were doing. She guided me to the bed, and I followed willingly, my body responding to her touch in ways that surprised me. I'd been with women before, but never like this. Never with such risk, such intensity. She eased me down onto the mattress, her touch gentle but firm. "Just let me take care of you," she murmured, her fingers tracing along my thighs with deliberate slowness. Every touch sent sparks through me, building something deep and urgent in my core. When she finally settled between my legs, her breath warm against my most sensitive skin, I had to bite my lip to keep from crying out. Her mouth was skilled, attentive, reading every response from my body and adjusting accordingly. She built the tension slowly, methodically, until I was trembling beneath her touch. My fingers tangled in her hair as she worked, my hips moving, involuntarily, against her mouth. The heat between us was overwhelming, consuming everything else. I was dimly aware of the sounds from downstairs, Rick's laughter carrying up through the floor, but it felt distant, unreal. Vanessa's rhythm was perfect, unhurried but insistent, drawing me higher with each passing moment. When she added her fingers to the mix, curling them just right, I had to press my hand over my mouth to muffle the sound that wanted to escape. "That's it," she whispered against me, her voice vibrating through my core. "Let go for me." The climax. Built slowly, then crashed over me in waves, my body arching off the bed as pleasure consumed me completely. Vanessa didn't stop, drawing out every sensation until I was gasping, overwhelmed by the intensity of it. When she finally pulled away, I was trembling, my skin flushed and sensitive. She moved up to lie beside me, her hand stroking my hair with unexpected tenderness. "You're incredible," she said softly, pressing a gentle kiss to my temple. I turned to face her, still catching my breath. She was still fully clothed, and something about that imbalance made me bold. My hands found the buttons of her blouse, working them open with more confidence than I felt. "My turn," I whispered, and her smile was both pleased and encouraging. She helped me undress her, each piece of clothing revealing more of her perfect skin. When she was finally bare beside me, I took a moment to appreciate her, the curve of her hips, the soft swell of her body, the way her eyes darkened with anticipation. Kissed her slowly, tasting myself on her lips before beginning my own exploration. Her skin was warm and soft beneath my mouth, and she responded to every touch with small sighs and gentle encouragement. When I settled between her legs, returning the favor she'd given me, her fingers immediately found my hair. She was more vocal than I'd expected, her breath hitching and small sounds escaping despite her efforts to stay quiet. "Yes," she breathed, her hips moving against my mouth, just like that. I found my rhythm, alternating between gentle teasing and more focused attention. She tasted like warmth and desire, and the way she responded to my touch made me feel powerful, confident. When I added my fingers, finding that perfect spot inside her, her back arched off the bed. "Don't stop," she whispered urgently, her voice strained with need. I didn't. I built her pleasure methodically, the way she had done for me, watching her face as she climbed higher. When she finally reached her peak, she bit down on her lip hard enough to leave marks, her body trembling beneath my touch. We lay together afterward, our bodies tangled and damp with perspiration. The party continued below us, but we were in our own world, breathing hard and processing what had just happened. "We should go back downstairs," Vanessa said eventually, though she made no move to get up. "We should," I agreed, but I was tracing patterns on her skin with my fingertips, reluctant to break the spell. She caught my hand, bringing it to her lips to press a soft kiss to my palm. "This doesn't have to be the only time," she said quietly. The suggestion sent a thrill through me, even as the rational part of my mind screamed warnings. "Vanessa, I know it's complicated," she said, her fingers intertwining with mine. "But I haven't felt like this in a long time. Have you?" I hadn't. My recent relationships had been safe, predictable, lacking the electricity I felt with her, but the complications were enormous. Rick was one of my closest friends, and I was potentially destroying their marriage. "What about Rick?" I asked, voicing the concern that was eating at me. Her expression grew thoughtful, almost sad. "Rick and we've been drifting apart for a while. We love each other, but we're not in love anymore. Not the way we used to be." It wasn't the answer I'd expected, and it didn't make the situation any less complicated. But the way she looked at me, the way her thumb stroked across my knuckles, made it hard to think clearly. A burst of laughter from downstairs reminded us where we were, and we reluctantly began to dress. Vanessa helped me with my zipper, her fingers lingering at the nape of my neck in a way that made me shiver. "We should go down separately," she said, though her hands were still on me. "You first," I said, needing a moment to compose myself. She nodded, but before she left, she turned back to me. "Taylor?" "Yeah?" I meant what I said, about this not being the only time. After she left, I sat on the edge of the bed for several minutes, trying to process everything that had happened. My skin still tingled where she'd touched me, and I could still taste her on my lips. The smart thing would be to pretend this never happened, to avoid her, to protect my friendship with Rick, but I knew I wouldn't. The connection I'd felt with Vanessa was too strong, too intoxicating to walk away from. When I finally went back downstairs, the party was winding down. Rick was in the kitchen, cleaning up glasses, and he smiled when he saw me. "There you are. I was wondering where you'd disappeared to." "Oh, I was just using the bathroom upstairs," I said, hoping my voice sounded normal. "Well, I'm glad you could make it tonight. It's been too long since we've all hung out." Vanessa appeared in the doorway, looking perfectly composed, as if nothing had happened. But when our eyes met across the room, the heat between us was unmistakable. "I should probably head home," I said, reaching for my purse. "Already? The night's still young," Rick protested. "Early morning tomorrow," I lied, desperate to escape before I did something that would give us away. Vanessa walked me to the door while Rick continued cleaning. "Thank you for coming tonight," she said formally, but her hand brushed mine as she handed me my jacket. "Thank you for having me," I replied, the double meaning clear between us. As I walked to my car, I could feel her watching me from the doorway. The night air was cool against my flushed skin, but it did nothing to calm the fire she'd ignited in me. As I walked to my car, I could feel her watching me from the doorway. The night air was cool against my flushed skin, but it did nothing to calm the fire she'd ignited in me. The drive home was a blur. I kept replaying every moment, every touch, every whispered word. By the time I reached my apartment, I was wound tight with tension again, my body still humming with need. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my couch, staring out at the city lights. My phone buzzed with a text message, and my heart raced when I saw Vanessa's name. "Can't stop thinking about tonight, about you." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Me neither." "When can I see you again?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. I knew what the right answer should be, but my fingers had already started typing before my brain could catch up. "When do you want to?" "Tomorrow. Rick has a golf game at noon. He'll be gone for hours." The idea of being alone with her again, without the risk of discovery, made my pulse quicken. "Where?" My place. I'll text you the address. I should have said no. Should have ended it before it went any further. Instead, I found myself typing, I'll be there. The next morning came too slowly and too quickly at the same time. I changed clothes 3 times, unable to decide what to wear to an affair. Finally, I settled on a simple dress that was easy to remove, then immediately felt foolish for thinking that way. Vanessa's house looked different in daylight, normal, suburban, the kind of place where nothing scandalous ever happened. But when she opened the door, wearing nothing but a silk robe, I was reminded that appearances could be deceiving. You came, she said, though she didn't sound surprised. Did you think I wouldn't? I hoped you would. She stepped aside to let me in, and I caught the scent of her perfume, the same one from the night before. The house was quiet, almost too quiet after the chaos of the party. Where's Rick? Golf, like I said. He won't be back until late afternoon. We had hours. The realization hit us both at the same time, and the air between us charged with anticipation. She led me to the living room, where she'd laid out coffee and pastries, a civilized gesture that seemed almost absurd given why I was there. I wasn't sure if you'd want breakfast, she said, suddenly seeming nervous for the first time since I'd known her. I'm not really hungry, I admitted, and her smile returned. Good, neither am I. This time there was no party to muffle our sounds, no risk of immediate discovery. We could take our time, and Vanessa seemed determined to do exactly that. She kissed me slowly, thoroughly, her hands exploring my body with deliberate patience. When she finally led me to the bedroom, her bedroom, the one she shared with Rick, I felt a moment of hesitation. Are you sure about this? I asked. I've never been more sure of anything, she replied, and the conviction in her voice swept away my doubts. What followed was different from the urgent passion of the night before. This was languid, exploratory, a careful mapping of each other's bodies and responses. We had time to savor every kiss, every touch, every whispered endearment. Vanessa was thorough in her attention, learning exactly how to make me shiver, how to make me gasp, how to make me forget everything except the feeling of her hands and mouth on my skin. When I returned the favor, she was equally responsive, guiding me with soft instructions and encouraging sighs. We moved together like we'd been lovers for years instead of hours, finding a rhythm that felt natural and right. When we finally reached completion, it was together, our bodies synchronized in a way that felt almost mystical. Afterward, we lay entwined in the bed she shared with her husband, and for a moment, the wrongness of it hit me like a physical blow. This is crazy, I said, suddenly aware of where we were. I know, Vanessa replied, her fingers tracing patterns on my back, but I can't bring myself to regret it, neither could I, and that scared me more than anything. We spent the afternoon alternating between conversation and intimacy, learning about each other in ways that went beyond the physical. I discovered that Vanessa was funny, intelligent, surprisingly vulnerable beneath her confident exterior. She told me about her marriage, how it had started with such promise but had gradually become a comfortable routine that left them both unfulfilled. I love Rick, she said at one point, her head resting on my shoulder. But I'm not in love with him anymore. I haven't been for a long time. Does he know? I think so. Neither of us talks about it, but we both feel it. It didn't make what we were doing right, but it made it more understandable. When the afternoon light started to fade, we reluctantly began to dress. The spell was breaking, reality creeping back in. What happens now? I asked, watching her button her blouse. I don't know, she admitted. I want to see you again, but it's complicated. Everything worthwhile usually is. As I prepared to leave, she caught my hand. Taylor, I need you to know, this isn't just about the physical attraction. There's something more here, at least for me. I felt it too, that deeper connection that made this more than just an affair. It was what made the situation so dangerous, so impossible to walk away from. I feel it too, I admitted. Then we'll figure it out, somehow. I left her house with more questions than answers, but with a certainty that this wasn't over. Whatever complications lay ahead, whatever consequences we might face, I wasn't ready to give up what we'd found. The next few weeks fell into a pattern of stolen moments and secret messages. We found excuses to see each other, coffee dates, shopping trips, innocent activities that served as cover for our growing intimacy. Each encounter only deepened our connection, made the desire stronger, but the strain was beginning to show. I found myself avoiding Rick, afraid that my guilt would be written all over my face. When we did interact, I overcompensated, trying too hard to act normal. Vanessa seemed to handle the deception better, but I caught moments when her composed facade slipped, when the weight of what we were doing showed in her eyes. The crisis came. At another dinner party, this one at a mutual friend's house. Rick, Vanessa, and I were all invited, along with several other couples. It should have been easy to maintain our secret in such a public setting, but the tension between Vanessa and me was almost visible. We tried to stay apart, to avoid any interactions that might seem suspicious, but our eyes kept finding each other across the room. Every accidental touch, every shared glance, felt charged with electricity. Rick noticed something was different. I could see it in the way he watched us, the confused furrow of his brow when he caught us looking at each other. During dinner, Vanessa's foot found mine under the table, a gentle pressure that sent heat racing through me. I struggled to maintain normal conversation while her touch made it hard to think clearly. "Are you feeling all right, Taylor?" Rick asked at one point. "You seem distracted tonight." "Just tired from work," I lied, acutely aware of Vanessa's foot still pressed against mine. "You should take a vacation," he said with genuine concern. "Maybe we could all go somewhere together. It's been too long since we've done a trip." The idea of being trapped with both of them for days made my stomach clench with anxiety. "Maybe," I said noncommittally. After dinner, while the men were outside smoking cigars, Vanessa cornered me in the bathroom. "We're being too obvious," she said, her voice low and urgent. "I know." Rick starting to notice. "We need to be more careful." But even as she said it, her hand was reaching for me, her fingers trailing along my arm in a way that made my breath catch. "Vanessa, we're in someone else's bathroom. I know. I can't help myself around you." Before I could respond, she pressed me against the door and kissed me, hard and desperate. For a moment, I forgot where we were, forgot the risks, forgot everything except the taste of her lips and the feeling of her body against mine. A knock on the door broke us apart. "Everything okay in there?" It was our hostess's voice. "Just fixing my makeup," Vanessa called back, her voice remarkably steady. We straightened our clothes and checked our appearances in the mirror before opening the door. I slipped out first, my heart pounding with the knowledge that we'd almost been caught. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced normalcy and stolen glances. When it was time to leave, Rick offered to walk me to my car. "Taylor, can I ask you something?" he said as we reached my vehicle. My heart stopped. "Of course. Is everything okay between you and Vanessa? You both seem, different lately." I forced myself to meet his eyes, hating the deception but seeing no alternative. "Different how?" "I can't put my finger on it. You're both more tense, I guess. And you keep looking at each other when you think no one's watching." The observation was too accurate for comfort. We had a small disagreement about something silly, nothing serious. He looked relieved. "Good. I was worried there might be some kind of problem. You know how much you both mean to me." The guilt hit me like a physical blow. Rick was a good man, a loyal friend, and I was betraying him in the worst possible way. "Rick, hey, whatever it was, I'm sure you'll work it out. You're both important to me, and I hate to see any tension between people I care about." I drove home that night knowing that something had to change. We couldn't continue this way, living a lie that was hurting everyone involved. But the thought of ending things with Vanessa felt impossible. The next morning brought a text from her. "We need to talk. Can you meet me?" I knew what she was going to say before I even arrived at the coffee shop where we'd agreed to meet. The guilt and strain were written all over her face. "We can't keep doing this," she said without preamble. "I know. Rick's getting suspicious. And even if he wasn't, this isn't fair to him. He doesn't deserve this." She was right, of course, but knowing something intellectually and accepting it emotionally were two different things. "So what are you saying? That it's over?" She reached across the table and took my hand, her thumb stroking across my knuckles in the familiar gesture that never failed to send warmth through me. "I'm saying we need to make a choice. Either we tell Rick everything and deal with the consequences, or we end this before it destroys all of our relationships." The thought of confessing to Rick filled me with terror. It would end our friendship, destroy their marriage, tear apart our entire social circle. But the alternative, walking away from Vanessa, felt equally impossible. "What do you want to do?" I asked. "I want to be with you," she said simply. "But I want to do it honestly, without all the secrecy and lies. And if Rick can't forgive us, then we'll have to live with that. But at least we'll be living honestly." I spent the next week agonizing over the decision. Part of me wanted to choose the cowardly path, to end things with Vanessa and pretend none of this had ever happened. But I knew I'd never forgive myself for giving up something so rare and beautiful. In the end, it was Rick who forced the issue. He called me on a Friday evening, his voice strained and unfamiliar. "Taylor, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." My mouth went dry. "Okay. Are you and Vanessa having an affair?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. For a moment I considered lying, but something in his tone told me he already knew the truth. "Rick, just answer the question." "Please, yes," I whispered. The silence that followed was deafening. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, defeated. "How long?" "A few weeks. Since your party?" Another silence. Do you love her? The question I'd been avoiding asking myself hung in the air between us, but I knew the answer, had known it for days but been too afraid to acknowledge it. Yes, I said. I do. And she loves you? She says she does. He was quiet for so long I thought he might have hung up. When he finally spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. I can't say I'm surprised. I've seen the way you look at each other, and Vanessa, she's been different, happier in a way she hasn't been in years. Rick, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I know. And honestly, part of me is relieved. Vanessa and we've been going through the motions for a long time. We both knew it, but neither of us wanted to be the first to say it. The conversation was not going at all the way I'd expected. Where was the anger, the betrayal, the righteous fury I'd been bracing myself for? What happens now? I asked. I don't know. I need some time to process this, and Vanessa and I need to have some serious conversations about our marriage. Are you going to be okay? Eventually. It's going to hurt for a while, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But Taylor, if this is real, if you two really love each other, then maybe something good can come out of all this mess. 3 months later, I stood in Vanessa's new apartment, helping her hang pictures on walls that were finally, officially hers. The divorce had been as amicable as these things could be, with Rick showing a grace and maturity that made me love him as a friend even more, while feeling terrible about the pain we'd caused him. Do you ever regret it? Vanessa asked, wrapping her arms around me from behind as I adjusted a frame. Which part? Any of it. All of it. I leaned back against her, feeling the solid warmth of her body, breathing in the scent that had become as familiar as my own. I regret that people got hurt. I regret that we had to deceive Rick, that we couldn't find a way to do this without causing pain. But regret loving you? Never. She tightened her arms around me, pressing a kiss to the side of my neck that sent familiar shivers through me. Good, she murmured, because I plan to spend a very long time making sure you never have reason to. Sometimes, the most beautiful things come from the most complicated circumstances. Was it right? Was it wrong? I'm still not sure. But I know it was real, and sometimes that has to be enough. If you found yourself in a situation like this, caught between loyalty and desire, what would you do? Would you follow your heart or protect the friendship? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know how you'd handle it. And if this story moved you, hit like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.